guys, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you're new. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and let's get right into this video. So today we have here Sister Spice. Hello. So if you guys didn't see the last video, we turned these nails to these nails. Make sure you go watch that video first before this one, because this is like part 2. We tell creepy Reddit stories and do this epic nail set. So for today, we're gonna be doing this hand, fixing her up because she's pretty crusty. We're gonna do a different Halloween nail design. So let's get started. Okay, so here is the inspiration for today's nail set. Really cute pink nail set. So we're gonna need some white gel polish, some black gel polish, some pink gel polish. We're also going to use this Nude Polygel from Makartt, some nail gems, and also this clear glitter. I know it's such a tiny tube. This is the only one I got. And that is pretty much all we're gonna need. So let's just get right into this nail set. Okay, so here's how Sister Spice's nails are looking. Look how grown out they are. I know this nail set has been on for more than a month. I don't know the exact time, but definitely a very long time. Very proud of it. So we're just gonna start off by pushing back the cuticles. Oh yeah, and we're gonna be doing a fill-in, I forgot to mention. So we're gonna fill in all this and create some new nails. Okay, next I'm going to use this circular cuticle drill bit, and I'm just going to work this around the cuticle areas. Next, I'm just going to use my cuticle scissors and I'm going to trim off this excess dead skin. Okay, now I'm going to go in with my fine grit sanding band and I'm going to file off all of this nail design. Okay, now that I filed the nails and I filed off as much lifting as I could, the middle finger is kind of like ready to pop off. So next I'm going to focus on the natural nail. Next, I'm just going to wipe off all the dust from the nails. Next, I'm going to add on some Dehydrator just to the natural nails. And then I'm going to add on some primer. Next, I'm just going to add a layer of base coat. Okay, so once we have all the base coat on, nails are filed down, we are ready to fill these in. So I'm just gonna take some Nude Polygel and I'm just going to put a bead of polygel at the cuticle area and I'm going to get smoothing this out.
Hi, I'm here with my Reddit stories, but I gotta start off with the 2-sentence horror story ones. This one is, my friend Sarah confided in me that her father was hitting her and her mom, so I promised I would help. While I pushed him down the stairs to protect Sarah, I had to admit it felt pretty good to kill someone who always dismissed me, simply because I'm imaginary. We're in the perspective of her imaginary friend. So I found some stories from the subreddit Ghost Stories, and this one is titled Ghost of a Lady in an Abandoned Hospital That I Used to Explore as a Child and a Teenager. Pretty long title, but hello, my name is Nicole. I'm 28 years old. As a child, my father was a security guard, and he had a job working the night shift at an abandoned hospital. From what I've read, the hospital opened in 1988 and closed in 2003. My father started working there as a night shift security in 2004. I've always been close with my father, and he would bring me with him to work. He would just sit on the computer between rounds and would let me explore the abandoned buildings that made up the hospital. I had many paranormal experiences during that time he worked there as a night security guard. If you guys want to hear about the other things I saw there, let me know. The one that stands out because it was my first experience there, I was exploring and I had wandered into the old ICU where I heard humming coming from one of the rooms. I walked in there and I saw a young woman, probably about 20, with long black hair and blue eyes, sitting on the bed. She was very pale and wearing a hospital gown. I saw her and immediately froze. Just looking at her, she quickly realized that I was looking at her, and she turned her head and looked at me. When we made eye contact, she smiled at me and said, "Hi, little girl," then disappeared. I think she was just a lost spirit, one of my many that was in the hospital. As I said, I saw many other apparitions in that hospital, including seeing her again multiple times. Let me know what you guys think, and if you want to hear some more experiences.
That's it.
That's it. Everyone's like, I want more. It's a little freaky. The ghost looked at her and she was looking at the ghost, and the ghost was like, hi.
At least she was friendly, ghost.
Yeah, the ghost used all her energy just to say hi, but she just disappeared. Okay, this one's another short one, but it's called I Was Given a Favor by what I think was a demon. Hello everyone, my name is Dalton. I'm 28 years old. When I was about 22, I had a really hard time, and I just lost my job, and my younger sister had gotten into a bad car accident and was on life support, and they thought she was brain dead and didn't expect her to survive. I was taking the bus back and forth from the hospital. My sister had been in the hospital on life support for about 2 weeks at this point. One night, I was leaving the hospital for the night, and it was pretty late, probably around 8 or 9 p.m. 8 or 9 p.m., that's not late. And I was sitting on the bus stop on a bench with my head in my hands, and I was just lost. After sitting there for about 5 minutes, and I smelled a sulfur-like smell, then felt someone tap me on the shoulder. Excuse me. I looked up and saw a young woman standing beside me. She looked to be about my age at the time, so 21 or 22. She was very pretty with very pale skin. She had long, straight blonde hair and blue eyes. She was very professional dressed. She was wearing a black suit, black pants, and a black dress shoes. She asked if she could sit down, and I said yeah. Then she said that I looked sad and asked what was wrong. I told her everything, and she patted me on the shoulder and said everything was going to be okay. Then my bus pulled up. I stood up to get on the bus, but before I got on, I turned around to thank her, and when I turned, she was gone. There was no way she could have gone that fast. I thought it was very strange, but nice, and I just got on the bus to go home. The next morning, I got a frantic call from my mother, and she told me that my sister had woken up. I immediately went to the hospital, and when I got there, they had taken the breathing tube out, and she was talking. About 2 weeks later, she walked out of the hospital with no lasting damage, and all the doctors said it was a miracle, and they had never seen anything like it. A week after she was released from the hospital, my old job called and rehired me.
What the?
I didn't know exactly what the woman was, but I wished I could see her again to thank her. Let me know what you guys think she might have been.
Interesting.
Well, if it was a demon, there's definitely, he traded something.
Right.
So he just got into a sell contract now.
But how does he not know he did that?
I don't know. It would be very clear. A commenter said, well, if she is there, there'll be a price to pay. However, I think it was not a demon, but some kind of healing spirit. Because if it was demon, they would have made a contract. They would have, nothing's free.
Right.
Not even that is free.
Healing spirit makes sense, but How would she smell like sulfur? That's like demon smell.
That's
or
a demon
ghost smell.
That's a demon smell. So my next story is creepiest Home Alone experience. When I was around the age of 12 to 13, I would often be left home alone after school. What a life. You just eat snacks from the fridge, forget about your homework, do that later. Play on the computer, watch YouTube. My parents and my younger sisters normally didn't arrive home for about an hour and a half. I normally didn't mind being alone at all. I could eat whatever I wanted, watch TV at a loud volume without being yelled at, and yell at how shitty my day was to my friend on FaceTime without being interrupted. On that particular day, I walked in the door and dropped my bags. All I wanted to do was eat a fresh bowl of mac and cheese and cry. I was exhausted, so I got to do just that. As soon as I began to boil the water, I heard the unmistakable sound of somebody wearing heavy snow boots walking around downstairs. I knew it couldn't have been anybody in my family because my father, who was always the first one home besides me, wouldn't be home for another hour. Even if he had gone home early, he would have messaged me, and I would have clearly heard the garage door open. To stop myself from panicking, I told myself that the washing machine was most likely uneven and I should go check on it. I turned the stove off. Smart, she didn't leave the stove on and walk away. I turned the stove off, and just in case somebody was breaking in, I grabbed a giant knife and went downstairs. The washing machine or the dryer wasn't even running. My brain basically froze. I stood in the front of the stairway for a good minute trying to figure out what I had heard, trying to put some kind of explanation behind it, when all of a sudden the room went freezing cold, and I felt somebody standing behind me. When whoever this was breathed down my neck, it was over. I was full on sprinted up the stairs, not only hearing footsteps behind me, but also hearing heavy breathing. Ew. When I got to the top of the stairs, I remembered I was holding a knife. I spun around to teach this not to go into people's houses, and when I did, nobody was there. I was basically stabbing air. I assumed that the intruder had retreated downstairs, so I locked myself in the bathroom and I messaged my dad. He told me to stay put and not to make any loud sounds. When I asked him if I should call 911, he said no. What? There I sat in the bathroom, trying not to cry because my worst nightmare had finally come true, when all of a sudden I heard the sound of heavy boots again, but this time they were walking up the stairs. I quickly messaged my dad to see if he was home, and he said no. I felt my stomach drop as the footsteps came closer and closer and closer until they were right at the door. I covered my mouth with my hand, but that still didn't cover the sound of my heavy breathing due to sheer panic. I could see the shadow of the person's feet in the crack underneath the door. I could hear him breathing on the door. I stood there, silencing my cries, tears rushing down my face. I was horrified. All of a sudden, I heard my dad's garage door open. A rush of relief filled my body. I heard the intruder run into my parents' room. My dad checked the entire house. There was nothing. No broken windows at all. The door was locked, and of course there was no intruder. The only thing that was wrong was the basement. It was trashed. When my mother had cleaned it that day, my dad joked about how it was just my imagination. He said that I just was paranoid to this day. I still can't explain it. I don't know what I heard, but I know what I felt. The end.
The dad knows something.
The dad knows something. The dad's summoning a ghost.
Or maybe the dad is keeping someone there and no one else knows. That's why he ran back to the parents' room.
Like it's actually a real person.
And the dad's like, oh, let me just go check. Oh, I see nothing. You're crazy, honey.
Someone commented, this is extremely creepy. I wonder whether it's actually a physical intruder or a supernatural entity. Just kind of like what you said. Another commenter said, I wonder why the dad did not want to call 911 and also why he didn't seem to care that the basement was trashed. I think he experienced something before and just didn't want to scare you more, or was in denial himself.
That makes sense too. I like my theory better.
I like your theory better. That one's very creepy. It's like, do you even know your dad? This next story is called I Lived in a Haunted House. When I was a kid, I lived in a haunted house, just like the title said. I'll preface this by saying I'm generally a very rational person and a skeptic by nature. I didn't grow up in the family that was religious or into anything supernatural, and if I hadn't experienced these things myself, there's no doubt in my mind that I wouldn't believe it to this day. Our house was built in 1912. On the outside, it seemed like a total normally, oh my god, I mixed up the words. It said totally normal, and I said total normally. On the outside, it seemed like a totally normal house. The moment I stepped inside the house, I felt uneasy and couldn't explain why. My sisters and I shared a room upstairs. I was sitting on my bed in my room one day facing the doorway. It was one of those accordion doors that would click closed, and there was about a space of 2 feet at the bottom where it didn't reach the floor. It was only my mom and I at home at the time, and she was downstairs. I heard the floor creak outside my door in the hallway as though someone was walking into my room. Then I saw a white mist type figure pass by my door. At first I thought it was my mom bringing laundry upstairs, and I waited for her feet to appear under the door. But they didn't. I went and peeked under my door to see who was in the hallway, and there was nobody. There was no wind and no way it could have been a curtain blowing. I definitely saw something pass by my door though.
Okay, sorry, we're gonna have to pause on the story. We already finished putting all the polygel on the nails. We're gonna get shaping these nails now. They are all nicely filled in. It really didn't take that long to do this. Now we're going to get shaping. I have my Makartt dust collector and a hand file, and let's get reshaping these nails. I almost forgot. Make sure you wipe off the sticky layer. Okay, so here's how the nails are looking after they have been shaped. Now we gotta get into this nail art. So I need this like light pink color, but I don't really have that exact color, so I'm gonna do some mixing. I'm gonna use this hot pink and some white, and I think it'll be good. Okay, so this is the pink color we have. I'm also gonna lay out some white here and some black. So before we get into the actual nail art, let's start off on the pinky nail. This one is gonna be a black nail with some glitter over it. So I'm gonna paint a layer of black gel polish first. So on to the next nail. This one is going to be the pink wavy design with some sparkles. So I'm just gonna use my dotting tool to do this design, but if any of the lines need cleanup, then I'll go in with the nail art brush. Into the story, just like a short recap if you've already forgotten, which is okay because I would have too. The little girl was just playing in her room or just chilling in her room, and she noticed like this, like she's thinking it's her mom walking past like with the laundry, but she described it as like a white mist. She sticks her head under the door and checks, and she sees no one and doesn't see any wind or anything like that. It's just nobody's there. And so she was expecting her mom, but like I said, she saw nobody. To pick up where we left off, another day I was in my room alone again. My family was downstairs in the kitchen at the time.
There was a wardrobe by the door that had a lamp on top of it. I was just sitting on my bed again, and all of a sudden the lamp started to violently rock back and forth. It scared the poop out of me, so I immediately ran downstairs, and my family could see I was scared and asked me what was wrong. I told them what happened, and they all looked at each other. I discovered later that they tried to protect me from knowing any of the paranormal experience that happened here. Another day, my sister and I were in the living room. It was summer, and we had one of those window air conditionings in the kitchen. My dad was just finished building a detached garage outside and had turned the breaker off so that he could finish wiring the electricity into the garage. There was no electricity at all in the house. We were all just sitting there, and all of a sudden, we hear the air conditioning turn on. My sister and I looked at each other and ran outside. My parents asked us what was wrong, and we told them how the air conditioning turned on by itself. My dad said that's impossible because there's no electricity going into the house. We had no explanation for how it turned on. This was back in the days where we would record songs off the radio and cassette tapes. One day, I guess I forgot to press stop while recording and had left the room. When I listened back, it sounded like a man and a woman arguing on the tape, but couldn't quite make out what they were saying. There was no one in the room at the time. When I would go to sleep at night, the lights were out. I would see what I now know were probably orbs, but at the time I had no idea what it was. It was like static electricity in the air. I didn't know how to explain it. The closest thing I've ever seen to it are sparklers. It used to scare the poop out of me, and I would run to my mom's room and tell her, and she would say, "Oh, it's just your eyes playing tricks on you. Don't pay attention to it." I would go back to bed and hide my head under the covers. There were spirits that would stand in the corner of my room and watch us constantly. After we moved out, I told my mom one day that our new house felt so much happier than our old one did. She asked me what I meant. I told her how our old house had such a heavy atmosphere and felt totally different, and I've always felt like I was being watched. I asked her if it was haunted, and she finally admitted to me that it had been, and that they tried to protect me from it because I was the youngest. I described two of the ghosts to her, the female that was always in the corner of my room and the male spirit that stayed in my brother's room. I described the time period they were from and how they were dressed. That the woman was in a long dark dress, and the man sat on the floor in my brother's room and looked out the window. No idea how I knew these things, and turned out I was pretty close, except for the woman who wore a black veil that hid her face, and the man actually had no legs, which is why I thought he was sitting all the time. While we lived there, I had a reoccurring dream where I was a little girl in a white nightgown, cowering in the hallway outside my bedroom and crying because our house was on fire. I was constantly paranoid about these fires while living in the house and would constantly check the electrical outlets throughout the house to be sure everything was okay. After we moved, I worked at our local library, and there was tons of resources about the history of the town. Turns out, before our old house was built at that location, there was a hotel that used to stand there in the late 1800s that had burned to the ground, killing several people. My dad was the only one who didn't experience things while we were living there. My mom had the most experience, and I think at first he started to think she was losing her mind. It wasn't until my siblings and I started to tell him about our experiences, and specifically me with the lamp incident in my room, that he started to think something was wrong with the house. My brother worked late nights and would get home around midnight. He would walk through the dark house to get to his room and would often hear someone calling his name. He thought it was my mom and would go to her room to see what she wanted, only to find her asleep. Eventually, he would rarely sleep there. He would sleep at his friend's or girlfriend's house instead. My sister and I shared a room. We had the female ghost dressed in the black veil, who would stand up and watch us in the corner of our room. One night, my sister woke up and to find someone sitting beside her on the bed, holding her hand. She thought it was me and asked what I was doing. "Sister, why are you holding my hand?" No answer. She looked over at my bed. I was there, sound asleep. She looked back and the figure was gone. To this day, she sleeps with her head under the covers and her arms tucked under her. My mom had multiple experiences. I'm not even aware of all of them and honestly don't want to know. I know she said there were at least 5 spirits in the house, plus others that would pass through. In our basement, we had an old, cold room, and this apparently is where the spirit portal was located in our house. Not sure why it was there or how it got there, but I think previous residents had dabbled into things they shouldn't have. And I said previously there was a hotel that had burned down here at this location, killing several people. I think previous residents could sense the presence of spirits and dabbled with the Ouija board or seances to contact the spirits and ended up inviting dark energies. Just a theory, but I believe people who lived there before us made the situation much worse. My mom is very sensitive to spirits and had experiences with all of them, I think. The woman in black was a protective spirit and would communicate with my mom quite a bit. I believe that spirit protected me from other spirits also. My mom was walking down to the basement one day and she lost her footing and started to fall. She suddenly felt hands on her chest and pushed her back up to an upright position. She never saw anyone, just felt them catch her as she fell. What?
Interesting.
Another day, she was vacuuming in my brother's room when the phone rang. She ran downstairs to answer it, and while she was downstairs, she heard the vacuum start up and being pushed across the floor. She ran back upstairs, but by the time she got there, it had stopped. She was the only one home at the time. We had so many issues with phantom calls in the house. This was before cell phones, so we had only a landline. The phone would ring constantly, and nobody would be on the line, or we would hear static, or as though there was a muffled voice on the line, but we couldn't make out what they were saying. I don't know how many times we had the phone company come to check, only to find out nothing was wrong. Then it escalated. My dad would get up to leave for work in the middle of the night, and just after he would leave, we would get a call where the person would say, "I saw blank leave for work." This freaked my mom right out, so the police became involved to try and trace where these calls were coming from. They had to keep track of the time the calls came in and what was said, if anything, etc. They were never able to trace the calls. We moved shortly after and had the same phone number. The calls stopped as soon as we moved out and never had issues again. Before we moved, my mom was really worried that they would follow us. The woman in black was very religious and my mom had an old Bible beside her bed. One morning she woke up to find the Bible open beside her and on the nightstand, and the words were highlighted, "And this house will be my home forever." Thankfully, they didn't follow us. I'm very sensitive to spirits and have had other experiences throughout my life, but that will be for another day. I hated that house and was happy to move. I'm grateful for the experience, though, because now I know our spirits do continue on after death, just in a different way. This next story, The White Witch. We're still in the same subreddit, Ghost Stories. In the early 80s, I lived in Okinawa, Japan. My dad thought that seeing the world would be an adventure that would help my brother and I become better men, and I have to say, I think he was right. Being in the military showed me cultures many would never get to experience, and I'm thankful for the experience that I'm thankful for every experience that life gave to me, even the scary ones. While we lived in Japan, my father wanted us to have a fully immersive experience, so he chose to move us into a small Japanese neighborhood off base. We lived in a little house at the top of an enormous hill in a cul-de-sac that overlooked, I kid you not, part of a huge zoo, and on one side, a fairly large cemetery. Our particular house was set far above the monkey habitats, about a mile down. Between us and those habitats was nothing but thick Indian Jones-style jungle that neighborhood kids and I would tromp through endlessly, ignoring the local warnings about poisonous snakes and ancient untripped mines from World War II. We were the only American family living in the cul-de-sac, completely surrounded by Japanese families, and it was amazing. The kids loved us, and although we couldn't communicate through language very well, we understood each other perfectly. Well, most of the times. Opposite us was an older couple with a lush garden surrounding their properties. The older woman wanted us to call her Mama-san, and she had us helping her garden whenever she could coax us over with green tea and chocolate banana cookies. We loved her. She was so welcoming and generous, as was everyone else, actually. We lived in a wonderful neighborhood. The only drawback to Mama-san's home, however, was that she directly overlooked the cemetery, and that cemetery was unlike any cemeteries I had seen before. Because Okinawa is an island, burials don't happen very often. Instead, above-ground crypts are built. Many of them built into the side of the hills that make up the island. The crypts are large, made of huge arcs of polished stone set over a large square of that stone, which had a square insert cut into the middle of it for the coffin to be placed inside. Once inside the square, is inset with another piece of polished stone just inside, leaving a kind of shelf on the outside so offerings could be made to the loved ones lost. Yen, food, flowers, incense are some of the offerings given. Below Mama-san's house was a valley that swooped back up into another hill, opposite her home. The valley and both hills were covered with these crypts, and spider webbings up and down through the crypts were various stone step pathways that were old and badly maintained. It was quite a sight. One evening, Mama-san asked me to come visit her alone. She had something to show me, but it was only for me as the older brother. Intrigued and a bit proud, I agreed. She took me to the back of her garden and sat me on a thick wooden bench that was carved with incense of fishermen and men with swords, and told me she had a story to tell me. Mama-san then disappeared for a few minutes and soon returned with a tray that held hot green tea and sweet rice cakes. Sitting next to me, she smiled and commented on the color of the evening sky as the sun began to lower. Mama-san said she had seen me, my brother, and some other kids daring each other to follow a stairway path down into the cemetery. You have to understand, the path from our little home area down to the cemetery consists of hundreds of steps, many broken or cracked, in and out of bushes, and a steep incline. It would be dangerous for anyone, but the real test was to see how long we could take walking through the crypts at night. Mama-san wanted to explain why that was a very bad idea. Many years ago, during the war, Americans were thought to be devils, monsters that would murder innocent citizens for no reason other than to kill. That fear was the product of wartime propaganda, used to encourage young men to the military service and farmers to fight alongside them. But many didn't. Many ran, and with nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, hundreds of Japanese citizens hurled themselves off a cliffside rather than face the torture at hand of their perceived enemy. I was terrified at hearing this. I had no idea this happened. I was mortified and hit with such sadness I started to cry. The sun was setting and the sky went from pink and blue to a deep orange and red. Mama-san reached out and held my hand, telling me not to worry. This was in the past, and the past is something we must always remember so we never go back. She went on with her story. One young woman had followed through with the sacrifice with her 2 children, but she survived the fall. She was in a coma for months. She did regain consciousness. She was horrified to realize she was not with her children. They had been buried somewhere in that cemetery below, in an unmarked crypt that held many others. The woman would spend days and nights searching the cemetery, crying in pain, the torment of her loss unbearable, until the day she had threw herself into the ocean to hopefully be reunited with her lost family. But they say she never found her children. Her act of suicide doomed her to purgatory. She would remain tortured for eternity. The sun had disappeared. The cemetery drowned in inky blackness, the main path dotted with dim broken lights feebly illuminating small areas. Mama-san continued. She still wanders the cemetery, she said, looking for her kids. You can hear her crying. And then she pointed down. I didn't want to, but I did. I looked. In the black of the cemetery and the darkness, there was a white figure. At first, a bright white shimmer, moving slowly, kind of shaking. It was moving from side to side, like it was moving among the crypts. You could actually hear her crying, softly at first, but then low moans and whimpers of pain as it got closer. I was terrified. I wanted to run, but Mama-san held my hand and whispered that she wouldn't come up here. We were too far, but that is why we shouldn't go down there after dark. She said many don't know her story and call her the White Witch, which angers her. It's best to stay away. It's best to pray for her. Mama-san said she comes out to see her often, hoping one day she will find salvation. Needless to say, I never went down to that cemetery, not once, and I never sat back there with Mama-san again either. That was enough for me. I did, however, visit Suicide Hill. It's called Peace Prayer Park now, out of respect. I cried the whole time we were there. I just prayed for all the souls and for forgiveness. So many Japanese citizens spoke to us, welcoming us, telling us stories, sharing with us. I didn't feel worthy, and my love for the country and its people was overwhelming. I'll never forget my time there. I'd like to go back to see if she's still there, wandering the graves looking for her children. That was the end of that story. I think that was pretty interesting, and how you could still see the ghost too. This next story is called Bought My First House. and found out it was haunted. I bought my first house in 2003 and was over the moon. Shortly after moving in, 2 of my neighbors began joking with me about the ghost in my house. Well, I thought they were joking, so I just played along, pretending I hadn't seen one. And it was no big deal. Just jokes, guys. Well, as time went on this summer, I met more and more of my neighbors, and they all brought up the same topic. Finally, an elderly woman on the block who was quiet, kind, and friendly told me stories after I asked her. I knew she wasn't going to screw with my head, which is why I asked in the first place. Turned out the previous owner purchased the house and never lived there because she said it was haunted. Sounds in the night of footsteps and sobbing, and glimpses of a man sitting in the kitchen covered in blood. One of my neighbors helped me with the renovation of the house and said that he was putting up drywall when he felt something lift up his dreadlocks. Though I've never had paranormal experiences before, it has been years, and by then I just chalked it up to night terrors. One day, I went to a small neighborhood video store to rent a movie. I had to fill out a form with my demographic data and then my credit card info. The owner of the store looked at the form and said, "Oh my God, you live in that house?" I asked her what she meant, and she explained that her former employee had committed suicide in my house. She came to the house as soon as she heard about it, but the house had been taped off by police as a potential crime scene. She told me that she had just moved into the house with her partner and called his mom because he wanted to invite her over to meet his partner and come out to her. This was in the early 90s when being gay was a big deal. His mother already knew he was gay because he bought a house with a man and disowned him right over the phone. The same week, he received a letter from an HIV testing center stated he had tested positive for HIV. This is when HIV was a death sentence. He then sat at the kitchen table, ate a bowl of cereal, and shot himself in the head with a revolver. Since then, she had multiple paranormal experiences in the house, with videos flying off the shelves, even levitating off shelves. The most I have experienced is sounds at night, sounds of Cheerios being poured in a bowl. I do not eat cereal. And sounds of sobbing in the kitchen. I often awaken to both. I remember my grandmother saying, "When the dead come to you, they want something. Perform an act of charity in their name and pray for them." So I did. I sat down at the table one night and lit a candle and told him that each night I would recite a Novia prayer for him before a lit candle. On the 9th night of the first Novia to Saint Anthony, patron saint of losing souls, I heard uncontrollable sobbing. I felt a strong presence of grief and despair, and the sound of hyperventilating breathing, as though someone could not catch their breath. I sat in the presence of this, knowing it was not malignant, but rather a connection of intimacy and compassion of which he was in need for. For 45 days, I said a Novena prayer before a lit candle for his soul, and had a mass said in his name. A few times I had awakened to feeling his presence standing over my bed, but I knew it was not malicious presence. This still happens from time to time, but less and less frequently. So basically, the guy who bought the house is trying to help him move his soul over. But yeah, that was the end of the story. What do you think?
Sad again.
A commenter said for this story, "Oh my, sad story. I feel this poor lost soul and lost hours of sleep. He was really wanting to be accepted from his mom. That was heartbreaking. Maybe starting a foundation in support of the LGBTQ with HIV or a donation in his honor. That would be so sweet and nice. I'm saddened because I'm a mother and I couldn't imagine turning any of my babies away, only because of who they love or who they are. I love them with an open heart. It's unconditional. The ghost can find a way to help his lost soul." So yeah, that was kind of basically the summary of the story if you didn't follow along. This story is titled My Daughter's Imaginary Friend. Imaginary in quotation marks though. In 2013, my wife and I divorced and we both moved into separate homes. The divorce went well and we were still good friends to this day, partly because we have a daughter together. We agreed to split custody over our daughter, and I rented an old house in a historic district in the city where we live. It was a very pretty home built in 1935, but kept up very well. I would have my daughter 2 weeks at a time, and she would have a bedroom in the back of the house. She was 3 years old at the time, and I kept noticing her talking to a friend. One day, I found her in her little closet talking to someone, and I remember her saying she was talking to another girl named Betty. I have no idea where she learned the name Betty, as she was only 3 years old, and I just chalked it up to a child's vivid imagination. Keeping in mind, I'm a single dad to the little girl. I really have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to dressing up, hair, or just little girl stuff in general. Her mother is good at that stuff, but not me. I put my daughter to bed one night after her bath. I remember brushing her hair that night, but that's all that I did. The next morning, her mom came to pick her up from the house, and my daughter was just waking up. Her mom went back into her bedroom to find my daughter's hair was fixed into 2 perfect French braids. Her mom was real proud of me at first that I had done her hair so cute, but I told her I didn't and couldn't do that. I can't even braid her hair, much less than do perfect French braids. We asked our daughter how her hair got fixed, and she told us that Betty had done it during the night. I broke the contract on the rental agreement and moved out within the next month. And that's kind of the last Reddit story that I had saved up here. So I hope you enjoyed them. And yeah, I guess that's the end of our Reddit stories for the rest of the video. But the next time I get my nails done, I'll be back with some more.
Okay, so once all the nail art is finished, let's add on some top coat. Next, we're going to add on some cuticle oil. And here are how the nails turned out. Let me know what you guys think of this nail set in the comments. I really love how these turned out. It's a really cute set, very simple, and I love the pink. Pink Halloween nails is just so cute. I honestly think my favorite finger is probably the ghost. I really like how it turned out. The hardest part was probably outlining those tiny hearts because they were just so tiny. And this is going to be our final Halloween nail set. I know I didn't get to do very many. I kind of started really late in the month. But don't worry, next year we're going to do a lot more. But next up is Christmas. I'll probably wait until like the middle of November to start some winter Christmassy nail sets. But in the meantime, I'll probably just find some other cool nail sets to do. So between the 2 nail sets we did on my sister, let me know which one is your favorite, the orange one or the pink one. I honestly really like the orange one. I just think the nail design is so cool. But yeah, this video is going up on Halloween, so happy Halloween. But that is pretty much it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you all next time. Bye!